Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Mayor Tashara Jones, and I use the she, her pronouns, and I'm excited to be here with you this evening. Tonight, we want to hear directly from you on what you hope for in St. Louis's next police chief and what that will bring to our community. This role plays a critical role in my administration and in my vision to reimagine public safety. When I say reimagine public safety, I mean we must create a public safety system that works for St. Louisans. For decades, our city has forced focus its resources simply on a large police force while asking the police to do too much. Our officers are exhausted. They respond to calls that will be better served by behavioral health interventions. Our community is exhausted. They want to feel safe in their homes and in their neighborhoods. They're frustrated with a broken 911 system and a failure to address the root causes of crime in their communities. When I think about the future leader of our police force, I know it has to be someone who understands that public safety just doesn't mean one magic fix. It means taking a holistic view of the problems facing our community and a vision that includes public health, and community policing. The states lack gun laws and preemption laws prevent us from implementing our own gun safety measures, which means we have to use other methods to address violent crime. St. Louis needs a police chief that's willing to confront gun violence, engage with community partners, work together to improve our 911 response times, and ensure that we have the right responder coming to the right call. I'm here to assemble a team that will help move St. Louis forward and invest in better outcomes. Already, we're working to address public safety concerns that impact residents across the city. Homicides are down 35% from last year and are lower than 5 of the past 6 years. But we still have far more work to do to address violent crime. And we know that decades-long issues won't be fixed in a day. We're working on structural fixes to our 911 system to improve efficiency and response times through consolidated our 3 separate dispatches. We'll be looking towards our new chief to help us continue this work. Tonight is meant to be a discussion about what we as St. Louis residents expect from our next police chief. Dr. Sean Joe will guide us through this conversation, but my goal is to hear straight from you and let your voices shape this process. We'll use your comments and the comments you put on our chief search survey that my team will paste in the chat to shape the questions we ask the candidates for police chief. Your words will help us write the questionnaire we'll ask each candidate to provide written responses, and your words will inform the questions asked at our public town hall event with the candidates. Before we get too far into tonight's event, I want to briefly recap for you my administration's principles of public safety, so you have some background on the lens that we see this search through. When we work on public safety, we reflect directly on these principles to guide our actions. Our public safety principles start with using smart on crime strategies to ensure that we can prevent crime and address it quickly when it occurs. We prioritize innovation to achieve better outcomes and ensure that our residents and visitors are physically safe. This includes programs like Cops and Clinicians. We know that nationally, only 4% of law enforcement time is spent responding to violent crime. This co-responder model ensures that behavioral support specialists respond to appropriate calls, and that takes some of the burden off of police so they can focus on the calls that need their skill set. The second principle of our public safety plan prioritizes healthy communities. We'll add 28 social workers to the city's workforce in the near term, supporting services like the unhoused outreach, reentry, and victim support. My administration allocated $11.5 million so far to increase funding for violence intervention programs and youth programming. We need to address root causes and intervene early to ensure better outcomes. And lastly, Our third principle centers on responsive governing that listens to the demands of the people and develops real solutions to meet community needs. This is why we're here tonight and why I'm committed to monthly town halls and community conversations, specifically on public safety. I know that solutions come from the individuals closest to the problems. Hard, candid conversations help us make more inclusive decisions. I hope that tonight's conversation, it'll be clear that the next police chief, how the next police chief fits into this framework and will be a key player in ensuring that we live these principles throughout my administration. Finally, before I turn things over to Dr. Sean Joe and get the conversation started, I want to take a moment to thank our current chief, Chief John Hayden, who joins us tonight. Chief Hayden has given St. Louis nearly 35 years of his life and commitment to service. I'm thankful for his leadership, and I'm grateful for his partnership. Chief Hayden has been an ally in our effort to reimagine and improve public safety, from supporting our efforts to directing funding towards preventive programs and to connect the right professionals to the right calls. He has worked with our administration to change police patrols and implement other solutions. While we have more work to do and a few more months to go, I'm encouraged that homicides are down 35% from this time last year. Thank you, Chief Hayden. Now, I'm going to turn this conversation over to Dr. Sean Joe with Homegrown STL to lead us through tonight's important work.
Good evening, everyone. As the mayor said, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I wanted to say my name is Dr. Sean Joe. I'm a professor at the Brown School and the principal director of Homegrown STL, our region's My Brother's Keeper initiative, guiding us through an unprecedented step to make the largest investment in Black male young men economic mobility over the next 20 years. Madam Mayor, Chief Hayden, I'm honored to serve as tonight's facilitator, and I welcome this audience to this very important and listening session. I want to begin first by just framing this a little bit. As you know, as the mayor indicated in her key principles, that a functioning society of any level, laws are indispensable because they ensure that lawlessness and violence do not rule everyday lives of the residents. And when laws are broken, our criminal justice system is designed to deliver justice for all by hopefully protecting the innocent from harm, both physical and to their property, as well as to making sure that they're protected from incarceration unjustly and punishment. But at the same time, our system is designed to make sure we convict and punish the guilty and encourage them to stop from offending. Public safety in America has always had a very high social cost, but it's driven by everyday people like yourself and government and policy, and then where government invests its dollars. Each of us have a common responsibility to ensure that our children, youth, and the elderly feel safe at home, in our streets, and as they travel between neighborhood to neighborhood. Although, as the mayor acknowledged very importantly, that violent crime is down, and then particularly in homicide in St. Louis, there's much more to do. So given that there's much more to do, the role of a police chief is critically important because, as we mentioned, public safety is always the responsibility of residents, those who they entrust, law enforcement leaders, and as well as those who are doing the day-to-day dangerous job of helping to ensure our public safety on our streets. But this is a sacred responsibility. So tonight, I want to just remind you, this is very unique to be in a conversation with a mayor, to be able to have that mayor listen. So this is a very unique experience in terms of the American experience. So for that, I say, let's take the real strong opportunity to engage in it and to make sure we get the most out of it. So my job is really simple. My job is to help us to make sure that we're listening to your suggestions, your priorities as we engage in this discussion. So let's talk about some of those principles for going forward. Sarah, if you don't mind, we can put that up on the board. So again, this is one of many sessions that the mayor is hosting. The next session will be on October 26th at 6 p.m., another virtual session. Next slide, please. So we asked that to contribute tonight, there's several ways that will make this really go forward and allow us to hear as many voices as possible, which is what's most important this evening. So we ask that you raise your hand using the function here. It's at the right side. It says raise your hand. And if you raise your hand, and then you will be called upon to be able to ask a question. We would like for you to also consider typing your questions in the Q&A section. So again, even if you don't get a chance to raise your hands, you can also contribute by typing your question. And again, we'll try to read those questions, or those questions again will be seen by the mayor and her team. There's also an opportunity for you to complete a survey. And as the mayor mentioned, this is a survey that they've been giving out to residents all over when they hold these listening sessions. And you too can weigh in terms of what's most important in the characteristics of a chief and the priorities. So remember, there will be opportunities for future engagement, but tonight let's get the most out of what we can. And I hope that you will allow us to do that, as we will make sure that you're able to contribute as much as you want to offer. So what is the work tonight? So reimagining public safety. The goal is to hear directly from community about what you would like from your next police chief. Remember, this is an opportunity to shape the public's candidate questionnaire. So there's a questionnaire that is used in the process, and that questionnaire could be shaped by your input today. Then there will be plans of public town halls that candidates or the candidates will be featured. Again, your key questions, your recommendations, your priorities, again, will be used to inform that very important process as well. As the mayor mentioned, there was already a survey that had 261 responses. So let me share with you to let you know some of the things that your fellow St. Louisians are saying at this time. So the survey's top priorities were: one, the 911 communication system. 77% of them referred to this as a very important priority. That means right sizing and making sure that the 911 call waiting times is decreased, to reduce 911 waiting times, as well as increase salary of dispatchers to attract and retain that staff. But more important, as the mayor said earlier, there's an opportunity to right size to make sure that the right responder is responding to the right call, so thus right sizing our ability to ensure personal and public safety. They also said neighborhood infrastructure is important. That means we do not see crime prevention or public safety as just a function of law enforcement engagement. Also, the spaces and conditions, also vacant lots, they facilitate either those who want to engage in social disorder, or they encourage positive engagement. When you have clean parks and places for people to play, it deters illegal dumping and crime. Having good lighting and sidewalks, context makes a difference. And then we said it's important that, again, we have experienced as a nation 2 million people who are incarcerated in the United States, the most of any other industrialized society. So there's diversion programs that people think are very important. To increase access to evidence-based youth programming, focusing on decision-making and life skills, and using street outreach workers to engage high-risk individuals in their neighborhoods, and then help them to get on a path to economic mobility that will sustain themselves and their families. Next slide, please. So the top questions that emerged from the survey is: how will the future chief ensure accountability among the police force? This is an ongoing question as we seek to revise and redefine and reimagine our public safety system. What does community policing really mean to the chief? The residents felt this was a very important question. And again, they say, if you become chief, how would you work to build trust? And ideally, I assume that means community trust. Trust that everyone's sense of personal safety could be attended to. It's as important as it is downtown as it is in the north or in the south. So these are very important questions. So again, I want to stop here because I do believe we would like to hear from Chief Hayden at this point. So Chief Hayden, 35 years of service. You're in a unique position to offer great insight because of your experience. What are some of the most important issues that you would like to see the next chief solve?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Sean. I appreciate this opportunity to share my insight. Certainly, I would hope that the new chief would continue efforts to facilitate the current downward trend we are experiencing in the reduction of violent crime, particularly homicides. To do this, he or she must continue self-initiated activity in the most violent areas during the most violent times of day. continue to focus on the areas most violent offenders, continue the expansion of surveillance projects in most violent area blocks and critical intersections, and continue to explore additional strategies to advance reduction of violent crime, which include the utilization of other resources and other professionals, which free up officers' time to address violent crime, such as a sobering center for which Mayor Jones and I attended earlier this afternoon for ribbon cutting. So that type of thing, as well as expansion of community engagement, so that the relationship between the department and the community continues to improve. I would also hope that the new chief would continue efforts to facilitate greater officer accountability. In 2021, the interaction between police officers and the public has to be impeccable, and any violations of the citizens' civil rights must be dealt with seriously and as quickly as possible.
Thank you very much, Chief Hayden. At this point in time, then, and we will continue to hear from the mayor and the chief throughout this time. But again, as we said, what's important for us is that we hear from you. So let's take this time to open up the channels. What are the most important issues that you, as residents, would like to see the new chief solve? What leadership characteristics are you looking for in the new chief? What else would you like to ask the next police chief? So please use the Zoom to raise your hand, and then we will begin to call upon you at this point in time. So let's open it up, because I know we try to do this in this kind of technological way, and let's see, let's make sure that we can keep the doors open. Remember to use the Q&A should you not want to ask a question directly. So the floor is open.
Folks can also raise their hand if they would like to speak. I don't see anyone with raised hands right now, but I am watching that.
So as they're coming in, please take your time. I would like to ask Chief Hayden, one of the things that is being discussed right now, you talk increased surveillance, is how to build community trust is the importance of having very good digital data infrastructure for the police and law enforcement. Can you speak about that, and how critically important is that for a 21st century city?
Sean, it's very important. I mean, hey, the surveillance work in open areas, and when I know sometimes people get a little uncomfortable when we talk about surveillance, I'm talking about intersections. I'm talking about places where there is no expectation of privacy. But it certainly serves as a force multiplier when it comes to addressing violent crime. And so often we'll catch the license plate of the carjacker. We'll catch images of persons that are committing violent crime. And so it's essential to 21st century policing, absolutely.
Thank you. All right, do we have any questions at this point in time, sir?
We do not have any questions yet. Quiet bunch today.
Well, it's okay. You know, sometimes you're sitting with your mayor, you're sitting with your police chief, and the director of public safety and others in the audience, and sometimes you feel a little intimidated. Again, I don't want to be the one just speaking, but I will continue to raise questions because, again, we have this unique opportunity in front of us. Please, just jot your questions down in the Q&A, or if you feel like you would want to ask a question directly, please take your time to do so now. I think we have one question emerging in the Q&A.
Yes, we do.
I see it here. Chief Hayden, the question is, to the mayor, how will the new police chief work with Kim Gardner's office? That is the question that is asked.
Certainly, our relationship between the police department and the circuit attorney's office has improved in the last couple of years, and so I think it's an ongoing work. The director of public safety is very instrumental in doing that, and facilitating meetings or what have you, to make sure that we are both accountable in our work for the city. And I think that's something that will be continue to be monitored, but at the same time, something that has improved.
Mayor Jones?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mayor.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I don't have any more to add to that. As the chief said, we have been working to improve our relationship with the circuit attorney's office, making sure that there are clear lines of communication, making sure that our officers are meeting her expectations as we are turning in information to potentially charge suspects so she can have the right information as she brings charges forth. So we're just trying to make sure that we're giving her the information that she needs and in the format that she desires it. So those are the things that we've been working on over the last several months. And we would hope that the next chief continues or helps us to continue that work.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We're taking a look to make sure again that we're answering your questions. I don't see another question in Q&A. However, there were some questions that was posed in the survey, so I can bring up a few of those and to keep us going. So the discussion of smart on crime strategies. One of the questions asked is, there is probably some gaps in terms of employment, primarily saying, how would you fill those vacancies within the rank and file? And what should be the approach of the future chief regarding filled vacancies in the rank and file? And Chief Hayden, I can direct that to you.
Surely. So one thing that I think that, and the Director of Public Safety has mentioned this, hey, one thing we have to acknowledge is that our officers work very hard. And when you talk about comparisons of salaries across the region, we are not compensated as well as we should be. And so that I know that the Director of Public Safety is working toward that goal. And so certainly as we see officers that sometimes look at other departments as the grass is greener on the other side, I think you have to acknowledge that pay is going to be an issue. The other thing is things that incentivize staying. I know that we've over the years have had programs such as tuition reimbursement. We have a strong recognition program, but that can always be strengthened. You can't say thank you too often. Officers are interested in possibility of doing different types of day structures. I know we have traditionally over the years done 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., and 11 to 7. Some departments are moving toward 12-hour or 10-hour days, and so our officers have expressed an interest in that. And so things that you can do to incentivize officers' interests. Of course, you meet regularly with the representation they have. We have 3. We have the Ethical Society, we have the Police Officers Association, and we have the leadership organization. So frequent meetings with those organizations to make sure that you're hearing from officers firsthand and that you are responding to their concerns.
Thank you very much, Chief. I want to remind the audience that tonight is a listening session so that the mayor and the chief can hear from you directly. Sir, again, if you can remind us to put up those primary 3 questions just to remind the audience. Please, you have the opportunity to do that by putting a question in the Q&A, raising your hand if you would like to speak directly at this point in time, and also completing the online survey if you find that would be the best way for you to communicate. So again, the floor is open for you as residents to weigh in at this point. And I do not see a question coming in. Please continue to try to ask your questions. Let me turn the attention back a little bit. Again, we have a series of other questions that other residents have provided us given the surveys that they have asked. So it's an interesting but practical question to ask going forward. What makes a good police officer? And how would that should be reflected in how a chief or a future chief talks about what is a good officer?
Sure, I think that Sean, this being a good police officer oftentimes is what any employer would want in an employee. And I think you certainly, when it comes to our job, we are held and should be held to a higher standard because we take an oath, we have training, and we have the authority like no one else in the community. And so once you clear those, that criteria, certainly hardworking, honesty, integrity, the things that any employer would want, but a hardworking, honest person is something that the next chief should look for in officer applications. Certainly we're taking them now if anybody's interested in that. But the key is a hardworking, and again, I think I mentioned earlier about the integrity piece. I mean, hey, in this day and age, there are no exceptions to instances where officers are violating the civil rights of the citizens, and so it's a higher level of accountability. But I think those who answer the call can appreciate that higher level of accountability. We just started a class yesterday in the academy, And I got a chance to see 30 bright-eyed and enthusiastic young men and women that are interested in serving the community in the right way. And I'm looking forward to working with them. But I think they are understanding, like what we talked about yesterday. We talked about the fact of the accountability piece, and I think they understand, and I think that they're willing to accept the call.
Thank you. Again, we're still awaiting questions. Take your time. Daryl Davis posts and asks, history has shown that police investigating police has not produced just outcomes, which has consistently damaged the trust community has in police. Is there an option to outsourcing the investigation in police misconduct? And I would also add, again, how do we bring that up in the context of selecting a new chief?
Well, I think first of all is that the challenge to outsourcing it means that, in other words, for example, out of the Ferguson Commission, the suggestion was to outsource police investigations of police shootings to the Highway Patrol, and the challenge was the Highway Patrol. They said we don't have the resources to conduct full investigations of officer-involved shootings, but we do have the resources to review officer-involved shootings. But I think the key is that when you have certain asks, we have to also consider how that funding or how would it come about. But certainly, we welcome the review of our investigations. Of course, we do have the Citizen Oversight Board in St. Louis, and I know that the mayor is working on ways in which their oversight can be greater. And like I said, I think we welcome that. Once you hear that another interested agency is looking at something that you've put together, it's certainly a great thing to say, hey, we see that the police department has done everything that it should have done in this instance.
Thank you. And given that insight, Chief Hayden, again, I think, how would one then consider bringing this up as part of the process in selecting a new chief? How would you begin to think about how does one raise this to see where does a chief stand? And again, is it a direct question? Like, how would one approach this?
I think you just said it though. Hey, when it comes to officer accountability, I certainly believe that it's just as important. In other words, how we do what we do is just as important as what we do. And in fact, in modern times, maybe how we do something might be more important than what we do. And so clearly, I think that you can ask the next chief, what is their position on officer accountability? Maybe they may have some examples of even I personally had been in internal affairs for quite some time. Maybe the next chief potentially would have some internal affairs background, but even if he or she doesn't, I think you can ask the question about how important officer accountability is in modern times, and I think you can get a good answer, a good feel for what the next chief would how he or she would stand. So they may have some experience in that area, or at least have made some recommendations, or actually enacted some discipline on an officer.
Well, that's a powerful point. Again, that in one's background, one can attest to how one has handled this in the past. That might be a good indicator. Ryan Walsh asked a question: has there been any progress made that policing is about direct engagement with a public health crisis, especially our sickness in the digestive information found in, okay, this is getting a little more technical than I know, in Geneva Diagnostic GI Effects Lab? I assume you might know what this might mean, Chief. The primary human negligence on the streets and in police force begins with what St. Louis eats in this $500 lab. I'm not sure, Chief, but I'll throw this out. I have brought up this $500 lab many times before, but the city might disagree. Again, this is beyond my call, so I'm going to say this is the question posed.
But Mayor expounded on it very, very well today at our when we were at the Sobering Center. And so, of course, we have cops and clinicians now. We have officers riding in the police cars. We have social workers riding in the police cars with our officers. And so the mayor has oftentimes brought up the fact that we need to send the best professional to the crisis. And I think that certainly is a great start to that, is that right now. So now we have officers riding in cars with officers, and then we just left a place where in instances where people are intoxicated or under the influence of substance, then we can also make a referral. And not only it's more than just dropping them off, but it's a referral that has wraparound services, follow-up services, and things that really closely address not only bringing the right professional to the right call, but also the issue of addressing the root cause. The mayor said it over and over again, the root cause of violent crime. And so I believe we're certainly on the right track. And again, you'd want a chief that wants to embrace the fact that, hey, we cannot arrest our way out of the social ills that we face in the city. But what we can do is continue to expand programs and thinking of additional partners and ways in which we can make referrals that keep us from having to come back the next time.
Right, and that addresses our second principle of public safety. Or as we talked about the three principles that we're leading with, our second principle is focused on healthy communities, which means that we have to address public safety in a public health lens. And declaring gun violence as a public health crisis is one of those things that we can do to make sure that we're looking at our communities holistically, not just in terms of the statistics around violent crime and around gun violence. We have to peel back those layers to see, to look at the root causes, what's causing this type of violence in our communities. And a lot of times it comes all the way back to health and poverty, right? And dealing with those root causes of if the community is not healthy, then it will, then those are the results that we'll see.
Dr. Joe, I hate to interrupt, but we do have Alderman Clark Hubbard in the chat, and I know she'd like to ask a question. I've been texting her offline. I'm going to go ahead and allow her to jump in and ask, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, you should be added if you'd like to ask a question.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you for this and all the other meetings that have happened and been planned around this important issue. Good evening, Mayor Jones. You look beautiful this evening.
Good evening to my Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Right. So I'm just wondering, Pippi, I know sometimes this is a question that I think of when I'm just going back and forth about different issues that are going on in our city. I just wanted to ask Chief Hayden, and you can say no, but just first of all, thank you for your unwavering service and commitment to public safety in the city of St. Louis on so many levels that I've seen in the front and in the back. And I just appreciate you, and you know that. And I'm sad, really kind of sad to see you go, but I know you're not going nowhere because of all your family and everything is here. So I still get to see you around, I guess is what I'm looking forward to. But
Alderwoman Clark? We cannot hear her audio. Sarah, can you guys hear the audio? Oh, I think we just lost her.
No, let me try to add her back in. I think she might have gotten.
Give me 1 second. I think we have to enable talking first and then promote her to panelist. It's a little glitch with Zoom.
Thank you.
Oh, but she may have also disappeared. Okay, she needs to come back in. I think she dropped off.
Okay, I do see that Sarah Russell has their hand up. So should I hit allow to talk and then promote? Tony? Just don't want to lose anyone else. This is high stakes.
Sorry, I got a confusion here.
It's okay. This is what happens when we're trying to work the technology. That happens all the time.
Sarah can talk now.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
There you go.
Hopefully you can hear me. Just kind of a general question either for the chief or the mayor. With your knowledge specifically of the city of St. Louis and this being a wider search, what type of characteristics specifically do you think a candidate would need to be or would need to have in order to be successful here in our city?
I'll take a stab at that first. I would say just sort of at the base of the criteria that I'm looking for is I would want someone who can be compassionate and enforce the law at the same time. I don't think that those two things are dichotomous. That we can take a look at someone who can take a look at holistic solutions and look at solving violent crime through a different lens. Someone who has experience in getting and bringing down violent crime rates wherever they're coming from by using different methods other than or with officers. Because one of the things I've often said about when we look at how to bring down our violent crime rates, it cannot just be on the shoulders of our officers. It has to be an entire community solution. And so someone who has experience bringing together community partners to address violent crime rates, not just homicides, but assaults and carjackings. We have to look at the other things that lead to homicide. And it's not, we can't just look at homicide just as one number. We have to look at other violent crimes, especially violent gun crimes, that also could potentially lead to homicide. So someone who's got the experience to do those things. And I do believe that there are some great police chiefs and deputy chiefs out here who are doing great work in their communities, who could bring that lens to St. Louis and then help us here.
Excellent question. Thank you very much. Sarah, do you have a follow-up?
So I'm not sure if Alderwoman Clark Hubbard has made it back in, but we've been writing back and forth about her question. And she wanted to ask, is there anything that the chief or the mayor recommend we not do as it relates to this search, and our community relationships with the next chief? And she may try to get back into the call as well. She's working to join from her phone, but wanted to put that out there.
Chief or the mayor?
Anything that we should not do, I think that we should not ignore the voices of the community in this process. And that's why we're having these town halls, these community discussions to find out what people want in a chief and what they would ask a potential candidate. And so I think that the number one thing is also we have to listen to the community here because we as public servants are accountable to the community. You pay our salaries through your tax dollars. And so I think the number one thing that we have to do is make sure that your concerns are heard throughout this entire process. Chief Hayden?
Mayor, I think echo something you said earlier when we talk about what not to do. Certainly as a paradigm, kind of in my career, we've always relied on law enforcement for everything. And we, matter of fact, when we talked about what happened today with the sobering center, the police officers work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A lot of models in the past have not looped in other resources, have not looped in others to help us during the hours that we work, which is 24 hours a day. And so I think it would be short-sighted to expect, better results or greater results if in fact we slip into old patterns, which our city is accustomed to doing. We are just so used to kind of asking the police for everything, and it's a lot of mission creep in what we do. But I think that we are certainly on the right track by trying to include other professionals in this public safety initiative.
Thank you. There's another question, and again, it speaks to the theme that you're discussing, Mayor Jones. The literature is clear. The number one thing to reduce crime or prevent violent crime is a job, and a good paying job. So the question Ed Bryant asked is, what can the business community do to help lower crime rates in the city of St. Louis? And what should be the relationship, I'm going to add that on, friendly amendment, Ed, of the police chief in facilitating that relationship? I want to throw that out. Mayor Jones?
Surely. Mayor, I yield to you first, madam.
I was going to ask you to repeat the question again, Dr. Joe.
Sure. So the question is, what can the business community do to help lower the crime rates in St. Louis? And my second part of that is, what should be the role of the police chief in facilitating that relationship?
Well, I think that we have started down that pathway of involving the business community in reducing crime rates, as seen by the recent Downtown Engagement and Public Safety Initiative. In the last 3 weeks, we've worked with the business community as well as law enforcement to not only have a temporary increased presence downtown, but also to work with our business community and our safety net providers to create safe things, safe and fun things for our young people to do, because we found that young people were just being dropped off downtown with nothing to do. And so we have found that engaging them in safe and fun activities decreases the opportunity for them to engage in bad behavior. So we've had ciphers with them, which is, as I understand, it's a rap battle.
Right.
We've done painting with them, and we're planning more opportunities and asking the business community to step up to the plate to help us, because it cannot just be on the shoulder of government and law enforcement to make safe spaces for people and fun spaces for not only our young people, but our families to come downtown and other places around the region to have fun. And so this is going to be an ongoing ask of our business community to come to the table with us to help sponsor activities for our young people and our families in the region. Because if we have all these idle areas, then they are troublemakers' paradise. So how do we activate our outdoor spaces, engaging not only the business community, but our arts and culture community, and really making our city and our region someplace that everybody enjoys on the weekend?
Chief Hayden?
Yeah, so an excellent question about what would be the chief's role in that. And the mayor certainly touched upon it, in that the director of public safety facilitated a meeting with the business partners, in particular downtown. In other words, you kind of have a community engagement meeting. Not only we go to neighborhoods, but also with the business community. And so when we talk about some of the challenges that we're facing, some of the business community have security teams. They were talking about working along with us, having their walk-arounds or their surveillance or their patrolling to kind of coincide with the districts, and so, and to give a greater physical presence of security personnel to make, certainly make people feel more comfortable and more safe. Some of that is funding related. The mayor mentioned that. Some of the times that they can invest funding in ways in which it would benefit the police department, or at least our enforcement efforts, as well as our engagement efforts. But again, the funding piece would be a way, and then the next police chief could be open and honest with the community partners who happen to be business owners, but set up meetings with them to hear their concerns, as well as provide ways or suggestions in which they could help us.
Thank you very much. I believe we have Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, who's back with us, and her hand is raised. Please proceed, Alderwoman Hubbard.
Yes, and thank you for the response when my computer crashed. I actually just raised my hand this time to offer a selfish plug, because Mayor Jones mentioned creating more spaces. I want her and everyone to know that Wold Center is ready and available, and looking forward to, if we can begin the basketball. The one thing they asked is that we do not call it midnight basketball, but we call it something else. And then they said, when I thought about it after Chief Hayden said that, maybe there's some way that we can incorporate a PAL league with that, because that's always been a good way to connect the community with our police department.
Thank you very much. As we're waiting for another question, I want to go back to the second part of, and if I take a little liberty again, please, we're looking, I think there might be another question. Let me take a look. There is, so let me just privilege that first. Daryl Davis asked, is it important that a new chief can articulate a plan to minimize and possibly eliminate the harassment of impoverished citizens? Example, ticketing, temp tags can become slippery slope for poor citizens. So this is related to the idea of poverty and police contact. Chief Hayden?
Surely, in fact, Dr. Ashman and I were talking about that the other day. And so, hey, let's say, for example, if we say that there's a disparity in certain types of tickets, and one would be tickets where we know that is affected by poverty, which is licensing. You know, sometimes to properly license your car could cost could cost almost as much as 4 or 5 payments. That's a challenge for people. And so rather than stop people for that, knowing that it's a challenge to do to get your car registered in these days and times, why not create legislation that kind of causes your licensing to be incorporated in your payment, but also we can ticket those cars as they're parked as well. So it's a violation to have that car parked, and then we can focus on moving violation. You know, people complain quite often about people driving erratically, and then we can focus on that. But clearly a kind of poverty or resource resource based kind of issue that affects people is the fact that it is a challenge sometimes to license your car. That's just an example, but certainly we can focus our attention on violent crime and erratic driving and things that really pose dangers to the community and concerns the community, and kind of as the mayor mentioned, kind of allow some of the other challenges to be addressed by other agencies.
Thank you very much. Mayor Jones, would you like to comment on that? If not, we can move on. We're not able to hear Mayor Jones at this point. Tony?
Something on her end.
I think when I unmuted her though, I saw her. Nope, that's not working.
Well, we'll take a second as we're waiting to hear from Mayor Jones. Alderwoman, do you still have a question? I see your hand is still up.
I apologize. No, I can lower it.
Mayor Jones? I think it's something still technical on that side.
Check
And
your
I-
audio source. You may have accidentally switched it to something other than the microphone.
Well, we'll give it a second for Tony and the team to work to make sure that we can hear from our mayor.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go right ahead.
The question about ticketing and minimizing the harassment of impoverished citizens. So I also think that we should lean on the state legislature here, because the entire process of registering a car is with the state. And our system has been broken since it started. I think Missouri is one of the only few states that makes you pay for sales taxes and license your car in a totally different manner than at the dealership. Now, I was working on this as treasurer actually with some of our state agencies to try to see what we could do to develop payment plans for people, because that's a $1,200 to $2,000 bill that a lot of people just don't have. And as Chief Hayden talked about, you can roll it into your payment, but a lot of people can't afford that either. So I do know that the state is working on a fix to this. It's an expensive fix, but they are working on it. But that still doesn't help those who are, as we say, riding dirty. But I think that, this is something that we can work with the state on to how can we help people who still owe their taxes, which the last time I checked, the people that owe outstanding sales taxes all across the state is to the tune of about $34 million. And then how can we help people pay up? And then also how can we improve the system going forward so people don't get stuck in this horrible cycle?
Thank you very much. I want to give us all of a time check. It's about 6:52, and we will honor your time. So please, this is a chance for you to really weigh in, and let's ask your questions. I'm going to the Q&A to see if there's another question out there. So Lisa Finner asks, are there any relationships in addition to the ones that have been mentioned with the business community that the police chief can be working on to maintain, renew, or to be established. So I guess it's looking at the legacy of the past couple of chiefs and say, what should be the priorities with the business community for the next chief?
Sure. Again, Sean, I think that first what the next chief needs to do is regularly meet with the business community. Sometimes some of their interests and concerns are lost in the fact that there's not ongoing communication. That's something that certainly we have improved over in the years. Sometimes it requires reaching out. Dr. Isham has facilitated many of those meetings so far in the tenure of the current mayor, and I just think that's something that needs to continue. Hey, the business community will work with you when they understand the goals of the police department, and in particular, quite a few of them are interested in the areas in and around their businesses. And so, if we can harden, if you will, if we can harden targets, if we can make their employees safer, if we can share information with them, that'll benefit both the business as well as the police department, and how we will facilitate that. I think it starts with strong communication, strong regular communication with the business community, and I think what's going on in the downtown partnership and the public safety division of the city is a perfect example of that.
Thank you. And let's ask one more question before we turn it over to the mayor to close this out. How do you think the next police chief should be involved in dismantling any culture of racism within St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department so that people can begin to trust this institution once again?
Well, so right now our officers are going through, and this comes out of the Plainview project, where we realized that there were officers that were openly making racial, misogynistic, homophobic, xenophobic, all types of things they're expressing on their personal social media accounts, and they were dealt with, and the range of punishment was training, and then up to and including dismissal from the department. And so I think that the stance needs to be clear that racism or racially charged statements and that type of thing is not tolerated. And so I mentioned training. So right now, the Drake Foundation, or the Drake, Karen Drake and her business, they are conducting in-service training with officers right now. Every officer has to go through it, but it's a conversation about how things such as the Plainview Project, how it impacts our relationship with each other, right, and how it impacts our relationship with the community. Very important conversation, and so far, a very productive conversation.
Thank you very much, Chief Hayden. At this point in time, I think you've heard quite a bit, and more important, you have shared quite a bit. And I would like to then turn this over to the mayor, as these listening conversations will continue. And it's an opportunity for you to weigh in to make sure that the questionnaire that is used to vet candidates is asking the right questions. And again, to make sure that the town hall meetings where you will meet with candidates for you to really be engaged. So continue to ask your questions, and Mayor Jones will now close this out.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Sean Joe, for your facilitation, and Chief Hayden for your contributions to tonight's discussion. And thank you to everyone who showed up tonight and shared what they want from this search. I am taking your comments in. I'm learning from what you shared. And these words will help shape all of our engagement with the candidates for police chief. This is not our only opportunity to discuss this critical hire. On October 26th at 6 p.m., we will have another listening session. As soon as we have a list of top candidates, we'll schedule the town hall and invite you all back in to see the next chief respond to community questions. In the meantime, please feel free to take our survey as it is in the chat. Thank you for taking time tonight to be with us, and thank you for all the people who are on the call as well. And God bless, and have a safe evening, everybody.
Thank you.